"Watch closely," my mother said. Her voice carried easily across the private rooftop terrace of the Briarwood Grand. It was one of those overly polished Sunday brunches, white marble tables, gold-trimmed china, bottomless mimosas, and people who cared far too much about being seen. Then she tilted the pot. The coffee hit me before my brain could process what was happening. Scalding. It poured over my scalp, down my forehead, soaking into my hair and sweatshirt. The heat was immediate and vicious, crawling down the back of my neck and slipping under the collar of my blouse. My skin felt like it was being peeled off in layers. Gasps. No. Laughter. My younger brother Ryan's laugh came first. Loud. Sharp. Performative. My sister Chloe was already filming. The red recording light blinked at me like a tiny execution signal. "That's how we treat trash in this family," my mother added calmly, setting the empty ceramic pot down beside her mimosa. Trash. The word echoed louder than the laughter. I didn't move at first. Coffee dripped from my eyelashes onto the tablecloth. I could smell it. Dark roast, bitter, expensive. It mixed with the perfume my mother always wore. Gardenia and Control. The pain registered fully now. My scalp throbbed. My chest burned. My hands trembled slightly. Still, I didn't scream. Because screaming would have given them what they wanted. Reaction. My mother lived on reaction. She fed on it. If I cried, she would smirk. If I shouted, she would escalate. If I begged, she would win. Instead, I stood. Slowly. Coffee slid down the sleeves of my ivory blouse and pooled at my cuffs. A few nearby guests pretended not to stare. Others openly watched, fascinated. No one intervened. No one ever did. I walked toward the hotel lobby, my heels clicking against the stone floor. The rhythm steady. Controlled. Behind me, Ryan called out. "Where are you going?" "Can't take a joke." Chloe giggled. My mother didn't say a word. She never chased. She expected returns. Inside the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned over the sink. The mirror didn't look shocked. It looked tired. My hair was plastered to my forehead, my skin already turning red along my hairline and neck. A faint blister beginning near my collarbone. I pressed cold water to my scalp. It stung. The urge to scream rose up anyway, raw and feral. I wanted to go back out there and flip the table. I wanted to smash her porcelain cup. I wanted to ask her what kind of mother stages humiliation like entertainment. But as I looked into my own eyes, something settled. They weren't watery. They were clear. And cold. If I went back out there angry, they'd post it. If I cried, they'd caption it. If I defended myself, they'd edit it. No. Silence was sharper. Silence made them uncertain. I dabbed my skin dry carefully. The burn would need medical attention, but it wasn't severe enough to justify the drama they were hoping for. I straightened my shoulders. When I returned to the terrace, the atmosphere had shifted slightly. The laughter had dulled into expectation. They were waiting. Waiting for tears. Waiting for a scene. I walked directly to the table. I didn't sit. I didn't look at my mother. I pulled my leather wallet from my bag, the same worn wallet she once mocked for not being designer. I took out cash. 3 crisp $100 bills. My share of the brunch. Even though I hadn't touched a bite. I placed the money carefully beside her empty coffee pot. Flattened it with my palm. Then I looked at her. Just once. Her expression was triumphant. Certain. "You're embarrassing yourself," she said quietly. I held her gaze. "No," I replied calmly. "You are." Then I turned and walked away. No rush. No shaking. No backward glance. Behind me, I heard Ryan mutter something about me being dramatic. Chloe whispered something about poor little victim. My mother stayed silent. She hated silence. Outside, I inhaled deeply. The air felt different. Cooler. Cleaner. I slid into my car, not flashy, not leased, not impressive. Just mine. My hands finally trembled as I started the engine. Not from fear. From the adrenaline crash. The brunch had started with a simple request. Ryan had asked for $75,000. Short-term bridge loan, he called it. His startup was about to explode. Investors just needed to see family backing. Translation, he needed someone else's credibility to secure debt he couldn't sustain. When I declined politely, the shift happened instantly. "You always act superior," he'd snapped. "You think you're better than us," Chloe added. And my mother, she had leaned back in her chair, lips pursed, calculating. Then she smiled and said, "Watch this." I drove toward urgent care, the sting on my neck intensifying. They thought I couldn't afford brunch. They thought my simple wardrobe meant failure. They thought my quiet lifestyle meant lack. They didn't know. They didn't know that 18 months ago, I had sold my cybersecurity firm to a global defense contractor. They didn't know I retained equity. They didn't know I now sat on 3 advisory boards under a different surname. They didn't know I owned the building Chloe rented her boutique studio in. They didn't know the venture capital fund backing Ryan's competitor answered to me. They didn't know because I never told them. Not out of spite, but because success, when visible, becomes a demand. And I was tired of being demanded. The burn spray at urgent care hissed against my scalp. The nurse asked how it happened. "Accident," I said. But as I watched my reflection again, I realized something had changed. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a joke. This was assault. And this time, I wasn't going to absorb it quietly. They wanted content. They wanted a reaction. They were about to get something far more dangerous. Consequences. By the time I got home, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Not texts. Notifications. I set my keys on the kitchen counter and looked at the screen without unlocking it. 37 alerts. Then 42. Then 50. Ryan worked fast. I already knew what I'd see. I opened TikTok. There it was. A slow-motion clip of my mother tilting the coffee pot. The liquid cascading over my head. My brother's exaggerated gasp. Chloe's laughter sharpened for effect. They'd added music. Of course they had. The caption read, "When your entitled sister refuses to help family, so you take the trash out." A trash can emoji. A laughing emoji. And the hashtag family drama. My face was frozen mid-impact in the thumbnail. Eyes closed. Coffee midair. It almost looked artistic. The comments were exactly what they wanted. "She looks broke anyway. Probably deserved it. Why is she dressed like she shops at yard sales? Mom ate. Mom ate." I stared at that one for a long time. My scalp throbbed beneath the medicated ointment. My blouse was soaking in the sink, stained brown. I didn't comment. I didn't report it. Instead, I screen-recorded the video. Saved it. Captured the upload time. Archived the comments. Then I opened my laptop. Not to stalk the views. To run a different calculation. By 7 p.m., the video had crossed 900,000 views. By 9 p.m., it passed 1.4 million. They were trending. Chloe had reposted it to Instagram with the caption, "Some people only show up when they need something." Ryan commented, "Should have paid the $75,000 man," shrugging. So that was their narrative. That I refused to help. That I embarrassed them financially. That I was selfish. They framed the assault as discipline. The internet loves a villain. It just hadn't realized it picked the wrong one. At 10:12 p.m., my private email chimed. Subject line, "Is this you?" It was from an old colleague, Ethan Morales, one of the few people who knew exactly what I'd built and what it had become. "Yes," I typed back. Then my phone rang. "Tell me that's not you," Ethan said without greeting. "It is." Silence. Then, "Do they know?" "No." He exhaled sharply. "This is going to flip." "I know. Because the internet doesn't just consume, it investigates." And Ryan made one critical mistake. He tagged me. Not my quiet personal account, but the professional one. The account tied to my legal name. The name attached to multiple cybersecurity patents. The name listed on a $220 million acquisition announcement from last year. The name on Forbes, top 40 under 40 in tech security. They thought I was unemployed. They thought my low profile meant failure. They had no idea I intentionally disappeared from public visibility after the acquisition to avoid exactly this kind of parasitic expectation. By midnight, Tech Twitter found it. The first post read, "Wait, is that Dr. Layla Hassan, the founder of CipherTrace Dynamics?" Underneath it, screenshots, LinkedIn, press articles, conference panels, my TED Talk thumbnail. The side-by-side comparison started spreading. On the left, me, speaking at a cybersecurity summit in Geneva. On the right, me, drenched in coffee while my mother called me trash. The caption, "Family assaults cybersecurity, CEO over $75,000 loan request." The tone changed instantly. The comments shifted. "What kind of parent does this? That's not trash. That's the woman who prevented a $90 million ransomware breach last year. They humiliated the wrong person. Ryan's video crossed 3 million views by 2 a.m. But now the comments weren't laughing. They were furious. By morning, it wasn't hashtag family drama. It was hashtag coffee assault. And Khloe, she started deleting comments. But screenshots travel faster than deletion. I was in my home office at 7:30 a.m., reviewing a portfolio acquisition proposal when my PR director called. "I assume you've seen it," she said carefully. "I have. Do you want us to initiate takedown requests?" I leaned back in my chair. "No." Pause. "Are you sure? The narrative is volatile." "Let it breathe," I said. "Because humiliation can be temporary. But exposure is permanent." They thought the video made me small. What it actually did was introduce millions of people to a family dynamic I had quietly endured for years. And people recognize cruelty when they see it unfiltered. At 9:14 a.m., Ryan posted a follow-up. A smug selfie from his office. Caption: "Internet soft." It was a joke. That was the wrong move. Because brands don't like jokes that look like assault. Especially when the victim has a global tech footprint. By noon, one of his investors publicly distanced themselves. By 2 p.m., Khloe's sponsored skincare brand removed her affiliate code. And my mother? She had no social media presence. But she did sit on the board of a regional arts foundation. By 3 p.m., the foundation released a statement. "We do not condone violence of any kind." They hadn't even spoken to her yet, but they saw the tide turning. And institutions protect themselves first. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered. "Layla." My mother's voice was sharp, controlled, but fraying at the edges. "What did you do?" I almost laughed. "I paid for brunch. You made us look like monsters. You filmed it." Silence. "You could have just helped your brother," she hissed. 75,000 is nothing to you." There it was. Not remorse. Not apology. Entitlement. "You're right," I said evenly. "It is nothing to me." She went quiet. Because now she understood. Not fully, but enough. And when narcissism cracks, it doesn't self-correct. It escalates. "You think you're better than us," she said finally. "No," I replied. "I just stopped pretending we were equal." The call with my mother ended the way all conversations with her ended, with silence heavy enough to feel like a threat. She didn't hang up. She just stopped speaking. Waiting. She had always believed silence meant surrender. But I'd learned something different. Silence, used correctly, is leverage. By Tuesday morning, the video had passed 6.8 million views. Major tech journalists were picking it up. Not because of the drama. Because of the contrast. Cybersecurity executive publicly humiliated by family over loan refusal. It was a headline too ironic to ignore. My assistant forwarded me 3 interview requests before noon. I declined them all. I wasn't interested in sympathy. I was interested in correction. And correction doesn't happen emotionally. It happens structurally. Ryan thought the internet would give him validation. Instead, it gave him visibility. And visibility reveals financial history. By Wednesday, amateur internet detectives had uncovered something interesting. Ryan's startup, Novolux Retail Solutions, wasn't about to explode. It was hemorrhaging cash. Public filings showed 2 late supplier payments, a pending lawsuit from a previous partner, and a venture loan secured against inventory that didn't exist yet. The internet doesn't just judge, it audits. Khloe wasn't doing much better. Her luxury lifestyle coaching business was built on leased handbags and borrowed spaces. People started noticing the inconsistencies. Duplicate backgrounds in different client success posts. Stock images repurposed as testimonials. When one lie cracks, the rest splinter fast. I didn't post a single word. Instead, I scheduled a meeting. Apex Meridian Capital, my private investment firm. Most people didn't know I founded it. It operated quietly through layered entities, strategic acquisitions, silent majority positions, the kind of structure that doesn't announce itself. It just exists. And Novolux Retail Solutions, it had just initiated a Series B funding round. Looking for liquidity, desperate for capital. Ryan had pitched aggressively to multiple funds, including one that happened to be partially owned by Apex. He didn't know that. He thought he was pitching to strangers. He wasn't. He was pitching to me. The board call was Thursday at 11 a.m. Ryan logged in from what looked like a glass-walled conference room. He looked exhausted, eyes slightly swollen, jaw clenched tight. He didn't expect to see my name listed as primary shareholder representative. He didn't recognize the holding company. But when my voice came through the speakers, recognition hit him like impact. "Good morning, Ryan." The color drained from his face. "What is this?" he demanded. Professionalism wrapped around my tone like armor. "This is due diligence. You can't do this." "I can." The lead analyst began outlining the risk factors. Unsecured inventory, unverified supplier contracts, inflated projected revenue. I watched Ryan's confidence erode in real time. "This is personal," he snapped. "No," I corrected. "This is financial." The board voted. Unanimous. Funding denied. But that wasn't the leverage. The leverage was the clause buried in his venture agreement. A reputational harm provision. Any executive involved in public conduct damaging to investor trust could trigger a review. And Ryan had 6.8 million views of documented assault participation attached to his name. By Friday morning, his board requested a compliance review. His access to company accounts was temporarily suspended. He didn't lose the company. Not yet. But control. Control was slipping. Chloe called me that afternoon. Not screaming. Crying. "They're canceling contracts," she sobbed. "Brands don't want controversy." "You laughed," I said calmly. "It was a joke. It was assault." Silence. "Can't you just fix this?" she whispered. Fix it. Like I was a system error. Like I existed to patch their mistakes. "I didn't break it," I replied. Then I hung up. My mother didn't call again. But she sent a message. A single line. "You've always been ungrateful." I stared at it for a long time. Because for years, I believed that narrative. Believed that success meant I owed them. Believed that independence was betrayal. But something shifts when someone pours boiling coffee on your head in public. Something fundamental. It clarifies. I wasn't ungrateful. I was unavailable. And unavailable daughters are dangerous to controlling mothers. That evening, I met with my legal counsel. We filed two things. A civil complaint for assault, and a restraining order. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just formal. Documented. Permanent. Because this wasn't revenge. This was boundary enforcement. By Saturday, Ryan's investors issued a public statement distancing themselves from recent controversies involving executive conduct. Chloe's follower count began dropping. And my mother? She received a letter from the Arts Foundation requesting her temporary resignation pending review. The silence in my house that night felt different. Not heavy. Not tense. Clean. I made tea. Sat by the window. Watched the city lights flicker. For years, I thought strength meant endurance. Absorbing insults. Absorbing manipulation. Absorbing humiliation. But strength isn't absorption. It's redirection. They wanted to humiliate me. What they did instead was document themselves. And the internet doesn't forget. Neither do I. They came to my house on Sunday. Of course they did. Because when narcissists lose narrative control, they don't self-reflect. They confront. My security system alerted me first. Motion detected at the gate. I checked the monitor mounted discreetly inside my kitchen cabinet. My mother's pearl-white Mercedes idled aggressively outside the wrought iron entrance. Ryan stood beside it, pacing. Chloe was in the passenger seat, filming. Still filming. Always filming. They hadn't learned. I stepped onto my balcony but stayed out of sight. The intercom buzzed. Then buzzed again. Then held down continuously. "Layla," my mother's voice pierced through the speaker. "Open this gate." I pressed the talk button. "Yes." Her face tightened when she heard me. "You need to fix this," she said immediately. No greeting. No softness. Ryan's board is threatening removal. Chloe lost 3 contracts. This has gone too far. Too far. Interesting. "I didn't post the video," I reminded her. "You let it spiral. I declined to stop it. There's a difference." "Yes," I agreed. "There is." Ryan leaned into the camera. His confidence was gone, replaced by something desperate. "You tanked my funding round," he snapped. "You interfered. I declined to invest. You sabotaged me." "No," I said calmly. "Your conduct triggered your compliance clause." Chloe opened the car door and stepped out. "This is insane," she cried. "Families fight. It wasn't that serious." I felt the faint sting on my scalp as the healing skin tightened in the wind. "Boiling liquid is serious," I said. My mother's mask slipped for a second. "You're being dramatic." "No," I replied evenly. "I'm being legal." That word hit. Legal. Because lawsuits are real. Charges are real. Board votes are real. Social shame fades. Legal documentation doesn't. "You filed something," Ryan realized suddenly. I didn't respond. My silence confirmed it. My mother's voice sharpened. "You would take your own family to court. You assaulted me. It was coffee. It was intentional. You refused to help." And there it was again. The core belief that refusal justified punishment. That boundaries deserve consequences. "That doesn't entitle you to harm me," I said quietly. Ryan stepped back from the gate like the ground had shifted beneath him. "Drop it," he demanded. "Drop the complaint." "No." Chloe's face changed from fear to calculation. "What do you want?" she asked. Now we were finally in the correct language. Negotiation. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let them feel it. The imbalance. For once. "You thought I was powerless," I said slowly. "You thought humiliating me would reinforce hierarchy. That's not. It is." My mother straightened. "You've always been sensitive, and you've always been cruel." The word landed harder than yelling ever could. Cruel. Not strict. Not passionate. Cruel. "You owe this family," she said, voice shaking now, not with rage, but something closer to panic. "We supported you." I almost laughed. Supported. They mocked my small apartment when I was building my first prototype. They called cybersecurity paranoid work. They rolled their eyes at my travel schedule. Support wasn't what they offered. Tolerance was, and only when I looked small. "You supported an image of me that made you comfortable," I corrected. "The moment I didn't fit it, you poured coffee on me." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You could end this," he said quietly. "Yes," I agreed. "Then do it." I leaned closer to the intercom. "No." My mother's composure fractured. "You think money makes you untouchable," she snapped. "No," I said again. "Documentation does." Behind them, a black SUV turned onto the road. Unmarked, but official. Ryan noticed first. "Is that?" "Yes," I said calmly. Because when I filed the restraining order, I also submitted the video. Time-stamped. Intent visible. They had provided the evidence themselves. The SUV pulled behind their car. 2 officers stepped out. Professional. Neutral. My mother turned pale. "You called the police," she whispered. I enforced a boundary. They tried to speak over each other as the officers approached. It was a misunderstanding. Family dispute. Blown out of proportion. The officer asked for identification, then calmly informed them they were trespassing. My mother looked up at the camera one last time. "You're destroying this family," she said. "No," I replied. "You did that at brunch." I cut the audio feed, watched as the officers escorted them back to their car. No cuffs, no drama, just paperwork. Consequences rarely look cinematic. They look administrative. As the Mercedes reversed down the road, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not anger, relief. For years, I thought protecting myself meant minimizing, dressing down, downplaying success, avoiding confrontation. But protection doesn't come from shrinking. It comes from structure, from contracts, from evidence, from saying no and meaning it. My phone buzzed. A message from my legal team. Restraining order approved pending hearing. Temporary, but effective. Ryan's company announced Monday morning that he would be stepping back from operational duties. Chloe posted a tearful apology video. It received half the views of the original clip. And my mother, she resigned from the Arts Foundation before they could vote her out. Not because she felt remorse, but because image control had become impossible. The narrative had shifted permanently. They thought coffee would stain me. It didn't. It revealed them. And revelation is irreversible. That night, I stood in my kitchen again. Same room. Same quiet. But lighter. Because power isn't loud. It's stable. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Untouchable. Not because I had money, but because I finally stopped negotiating with people who only understood dominance. They wanted trash. What they got was consequence. And we weren't finished yet. By Monday morning, the fallout was undeniable. Ryan's startup board called an emergency meeting. Chloe's social media managers had begun reviewing every post she had ever made. And my mother, well, she had been fielding angry emails from the Arts Foundation, her colleagues, and several local philanthropists questioning her conduct. I sat in my office, sunlight cutting through the blinds, my laptop open on the table, a cup of herbal tea steaming beside me. My burn was healing slowly, a tender reminder of brunch, of humiliation, of entitlement. My phone buzzed. It was my legal counsel, Elena. "Layla," she said, voice tight, "do you realize the board just froze Ryan's personal accounts and assets until review? They're asking for your input. It's unprecedented." "I know," I said calmly, "and I'll provide it." "What do you mean? You have the controlling stake?" she asked. "Yes." A pause. "I've never seen anything like this," she admitted. I hung up, a faint smile touching my lips. It wasn't gloating. It was clarity. Finally, the leverage was fully mine. I drafted a series of documents that day. My goal wasn't vengeance for humiliation alone. It was to stabilize the ecosystem of consequences they had created for themselves. Ryan's financial mismanagement, Chloe's social media recklessness, my mother's public assault. Each piece had documentation now, legally and digitally verifiable. This was meticulous strategy, not chaos. By noon, I emailed the board with a detailed evaluation of Ryan's operational performance. I included compliance violations, financial inconsistencies, and, subtly, the TikTok video. I also attached a note suggesting that any future transactions involving public conduct or personal loans requested by executives must receive board approval. Ryan was already sweating in the conference room. He had assumed the worst outcome would be embarrassment on social media. He had never factored in legal enforcement, board control, or strategic corporate influence. And yet here it was, precise, unarguable, and delivered without emotion. By late afternoon, Chloe's management reached out for consultation. Her sponsors were pulling contracts. Her apologies, though viral, weren't enough. They were attached to a pattern, publicly laughing at another person's humiliation. My involvement remained invisible. I let the natural consequences take hold. Meanwhile, my mother called again. I didn't answer. She texted, short messages, accusatory, desperate, sometimes pleading. I left them unread. The principle was simple. Nothing they did could override accountability. Nothing they felt entitled to could bypass consequence. Later that week, a local reporter emailed. The story of a public family humiliation escalating into corporate consequences intrigued them. But I refused to comment. I didn't need public vindication. The evidence was enough. The public could form the narrative on its own. That night, I reviewed Ryan's latest internal financial statements, noting the gaps and inconsistencies. With my firm's backing, I proposed restructuring the venture under a temporary oversight committee. The board accepted immediately. The result: Ryan had no access to critical funds or decision-making until a formal review. Chloe's social media career crumbled further. Brands that once sponsored her content began withdrawing support, citing moral clauses. I made sure every interaction, every post, every story about the brunch incident was preserved in my archives, proof of the misconduct they had chosen to immortalize themselves. I didn't feel satisfaction in a traditional sense. No triumphant laughter, no revenge fantasies. I felt certainty. Every move I made was measured, deliberate, precise. And still, my mother tried to push. "Layla, this isn't what family does," she texted. "We raised you better." "No," I replied. "You raised entitlement. I raised boundaries." It was my last personal message to her. I blocked the thread. By Friday, the professional consequences had reached maximum effect. Ryan could operate his company only under oversight. Chloe was facing contract terminations and sponsorship losses. My mother remained publicly shamed, isolated in her philanthropic circle. The quiet that followed was intense. Not celebratory, not victorious. It was clear. The chaos that had defined my family's interactions for decades had shifted. The imbalance had corrected itself. They had demanded reaction, and in silence, I had provided leverage. I poured myself another cup of tea, green this time. No bitterness, no reminders, and sat by the window. I watched the city's skyline glow, thinking not of revenge, but of freedom. Finally, it was mine. My life. My choices. My consequences. Not theirs. And the world had seen it unfold exactly as it had to. Unfiltered, undeniable, just. 2 weeks later, the dust had settled. The landscape of my family's influence had shifted irreversibly. Ryan's board had completed the review. He retained a minor advisory role, but operational control was permanently restricted. Chloe's social media presence had been drastically reduced. Sponsors avoided any association with controversy, leaving her scrambling to salvage relevance. My mother, Angela, was the hardest to account for. She no longer called, no longer texted. Her attempts at public statements had been stifled by the Arts Foundation, and the local philanthropists who once followed her every move had quietly withdrawn attention. She had become quiet, not defeated, not reformed, just irrelevant. I sat on the deck of my cabin that evening, the wind crisp and carrying the faint scent of pine. My scalp had healed completely. The physical burn was gone. The emotional one lingered slightly, a reminder of the humiliation and the entitlement I had endured for decades. But it no longer controlled me. I checked my phone. No alerts from them. No viral updates. Just peace. For the first time, real uninterrupted peace. I thought about the brunch, the coffee, the laughter, the cameras. They thought they could diminish me with heat, with shame, with spectacle. They underestimated one thing, the quiet power of composure, strategy, and foresight. That weekend, I drove through the valley roads near my cabin, windows down, music low, thoughts clear. The sunlight reflected on the hood of my car, glinting like promise. I realized that what they had labeled trash was not broken, disposable, or weak. It was precise, resilient, untouchable. A notification buzzed. It was an old friend, someone who had followed the viral incident. She handled that like a boss, the message read. I smiled faintly, not because I wanted validation, but because the perception of control matters in life, especially when you have wielded it quietly for so long. I reflected on the lesson I had lived through and turned into practice. Never allow anyone to define your value. Document everything. Evidence is more potent than anger. Silence can be louder than screams. Boundaries are stronger than compromise when your safety is at stake. Leverage is ethical when it protects you from abuse. By Monday morning, I had closed the last email from Ryan's lawyers. They were requesting meetings to discuss company restructuring under my terms. Chloe had reached out with a tentative message of regret. Angela had not, and that was fine. I prepared breakfast for myself that day. No brunch, no audience, no judgment. Just tea, toast, sunlight through the window. A small smile curled on my lips. The sound of my dog padding across the floor brought warmth. Freedom, I realized, tastes different when it is earned through strategy rather than luck. I sent out a few professional notes to my contacts, quiet, deliberate updates on my latest venture. The world continued as it always does, but I knew the boundaries were now unassailable. My family had exposed themselves, and the internet had witnessed it. Their own actions had sealed the truth. Late that evening, I walked to the cliffside behind my cabin, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The mountains glowed gold. The valley below was quiet. I felt a weight lift, not because I had power over them, but because I no longer needed it. The bridge was not just burned, it was gone, and I had built my own path beyond the ashes. I glanced at my phone one last time. No alerts from them. No TikTok tags. No texts accusing, blaming, or demanding. Silence. I breathed it in. The horizon ahead was mine. The road unbroken. My life fully reclaimed. And as the wind brushed against my face, I whispered softly to myself, "Trash. No. Untouchable. Free. Finally free." With that, I turned, walked back to the cabin, and closed the door behind me. The sun had set, but the light in my mind was unwavering. The past could not follow. The present was mine. And the future, entirely unwritten.